Morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know, and I think you all know that I'm the co-founder of the Family Success Institute along with Tom. Exciting things are happening. I'm so proud of all the work that's being done and where we're moving with this. What I'd like to do is turn this over to Tom. Just remember, we're being recorded. Mute your microphone if you're not talking so that we don't get feedback. And Mr. Blattner.
Thank you, Jean, and good morning to everybody, and hope everybody is doing well. Just so you know, when I'm on a Zoom with Desiree, I get fixated by her face because her expressions tell me what's going on in the meeting. So I'm watching Desiree. So first of all, I hope everybody's doing well. And for those of you who are, joining our learning community, welcome. And we're so delighted that you are with us. And I hope everybody gets a chance to enjoy a bit of the summer of 2022, despite everything that's going on, in terms of our work and the world and everything. But I hope everybody is well and gets a chance to have a little bit of a vacation. I'm going to just talk a little bit at the beginning, and then because we've got a very full and I think really interesting agenda for people to participate in. But what struck me since our last meeting is a lot's happened in the world since we last gathered. The first thing that's happened is we've had these just absolutely unacceptable and tragic and horrendous shootings in a number of our communities, from Texas to upstate New York, and then we have this this U-Haul full of militiamen out there in the far west that were thwarted. But there are forces in our communities that are just unacceptable and are not going to be unabated unless they're unabated by us. So that was one thought that I had. Secondly is the economic struggles that many people are going through due to inflation and disruptions in the labor market, while a lot of people are making a lot more money off of everybody else's distress. And that gets right to our Bill of Rights, which is to try to move from privilege for some to rights for all. But it's very painful right now for a lot of people out in the community. The June 6th hearings and yesterday I thought was very compelling, because we are obviously in the midst of a clear and present danger to our democracy. And it's not going to be solved by people on high. It's going to be solved like people like us in the community, working together to reclaim what this whole place is supposed to be about in the first place. And then finally, the onslaught in Ukraine. And it's just impossible. It seems to be fading a little bit in terms of, its presence on the news in light of everything else that's going on, but it's happening as we're sitting here. And it's an amazing example of somebody who appeared from nowhere as a hero, and people in a community deciding to take control of their own lives. And it just reminded me of what we're involved with, and that I think we're at a crucial point in the work we're doing. And it's obvious, I think, from the very, very personal level to the community level, to at all levels, that we need transformational change that offers hope for people. And it's sort of interesting that both historians who are looking back and futurists who are looking forward are, I don't know if it's begrudgingly or not, but they're coming to the conclusion that hope and change is not going to come from what we think of as the traditional top. It's going to come from us and our colleagues and our friends in the community. So as I was thinking about this meeting, it just makes the work that you're doing, more and more impressive, and in a lot of ways more important. So today, I'm trying to set the stage that I think we're in a beginning of a shift in our learning community, and Tim is going to be sharing a number of really, I hope that you'll find exciting developments that we're in the midst of. But the work is going to have to shift to be successful a little bit from our convening you to you leading us, because the changes that we are in the midst of and we're proposing are not going to be easy. They're going to be stumbles along the way, and there's going to be resistance. But the way that it's going to be carried through are by all of you and all the people you know, and your hard work and your inspiration and your energy. So Kim's going to be talking about two major things. One is the kickoff of our community action forums that are intended to bring people who normally do not have a voice in what happens in the future directly into decision making around those things. And then secondly, we're talking about some exciting institutional changes in the structure of state government policy that will support the kinds of changes that we've all been working for. So, and they are not going to happen by us. They're going to happen by all of us getting together with people we know and putting some energy into some significant change. So before we get to Tim, the other thing that's happened over the weekend was Juneteenth and Father's Day, and the fact that these two phenomena, which are just amazing, that I think signs of hope have come together, I think are really, really significant. And Karen Andrade Mims, who is the head of the Center for Fathers in Mercer County, and has some exciting news to share about the work that she's in the midst of, also had some amazing work over the weekend. And she is the convener of our Fathers and Families work group, and she's going to offer some observations on her experience over the weekend. So Karen, I'm really pleased that you're with us.
Great, thank you, Tom. And I'm also pleased to be able to share some upbeat, happy news, because when you think about the things that Tom just shared that we're all dealing with, it can be a real downer. Doesn't change the fact that we have to get on the ground and do the work. But I'm excited about the fact that this weekend was Father's Day. And annually, my organization, the Father Center of New Jersey, hosts an event called Platinum Dads. I want to give a shout out to Kathy Rowe. Parents Inc. was one of our sponsors. This year, we honored 14 men throughout the region. 3 of them were our own client participants who are, part of our programming, but just a feel-good, upbeat, really, really heartwarming morning. It was a breakfast. Each man got an award, got to come up to the mic and talk about what fatherhood meant to him. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I'm hearing a lot more about fatherhood these days. A lot of conferences, a lot of people are talking about it. So, it's positive and moving forward. So I'm excited about that. And it looks like with regard to Juneteenth, that Juneteenth is going to be celebrated on the 3rd Friday, I believe, or 3rd Sunday. I'm not sure which, because it's kind of confusing right now, but it's the 3rd weekend in June. So moving forward, it will always be tied to fatherhood, which I think is also really cool. So our celebration was something that I'm proud of, and that's my inspiration when we know that the work that we do comes full circle in being able to recognize that dad matters. With regard to our work group, our Fathers and Families work group, we haven't met recently, but we are at the point now where we have submitted to Tom the writing and the thoughts and the ideas that we put on paper. So our policy statement is forthcoming, and I'm excited about that as well. And just as a side note, I have some connections in Pennsylvania through Dr. Rufus Lynch, and they just voted through the Senate and the House to set up a fatherhood task force in Pennsylvania. So I'm so excited for them. Maybe we're not too far behind. There are neighbors next door. So hopefully that'll be something that we can see looming, Kathy, in you and my tenure before we say goodbye. And lastly, I just want to share that the Father Center of New Jersey is hosting a statewide fatherhood conference that will be on Thursday, November 3rd. We've sent out a bit of information, save the date, but I'm also, again, reminding folks, it will be Thursday from 8:30 to 2:30 at the State Training Center in right outside of New Brunswick. And right now we're in the process of soliciting workshops. We've gotten some workshop information, people who are interested in doing workshops at the event, but it's still open, correct, Carter, for people if they would like to submit an RFP for the workshop?
Yes, it is still open, yes.
Great, so let me know. I'll put my email in the chat room if you're interested in submitting a proposal to do a workshop. We're also lining up our speakers. I'm excited to share that one of our speakers, who actually may end up being our keynote, is Dr. Wade Horn. And for those who are not familiar, he actually is one of the founders of the National Fatherhood Initiative. So he will be joining us. He's in Virginia, he's based in Virginia, but he will be joining us at the conference. So I'm really excited about that. So we'll keep you posted. continuing to send out emails and also providing updates as we meet in the learning community. Thanks, Tom.
Terrific, Karen. Thanks so much. And our friends at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation shared with us a link, which I think, Lori, you're going to put into the chat, which was related to a series of items on fathers and families, which I hope you'll take a look at, because it's just very, very inspirational. And, you know, it's funny, Karen, you talk about the downers that I presented and then the uppers that you're experiencing in the community. And I think what's, you know, so challenging about all of this is that both are at play at the same time. Although I must say that my experience is that the uppers are the work you're doing every place all over the state in local communities. But the top-down stuff doesn't seem to be moving quite as quickly as, you know, families and communities and the people who work within families and communities. So I will try to be a little more optimistic, but I think we got some pretty significant forces that we have to overcome. And it's not going to be happening because we're nice people. We have to be strong people. And in my increasingly humble opinion, we have to be a little meaner people than to realize who we're dealing with. So anyway, moving right along, Timothy has been doing an amazing amount of work on the community action forums, which are designed to bring a lot of people into this process that haven't had a chance. And I'd like to turn to you, Timothy, to talk about what's going on there.
There, I got myself off mute. That's a major accomplishment. First, and as I look at this array of people on a Wednesday as summer gets underway, I am and continue to be impressed by the commitment that all of you bring to these gatherings and represent in a state that reflects enormous potential and stumbles forward and then takes a step back in all the areas of equity and combating what I think are institutional forces that have limited the potential both of the state and of all of its citizens. And as you're aware, we assembled 5 different work groups to create individual forums for exploring how do we frame and identify and pinpoint what family success requires beyond the pillars that we've identified and sort of the general philosophy that propels the movement. And each of those work groups has met numerous times. Karen just gave you a summary of where the Fathers and Families work group is. And it's enormously exciting that each of them has now created a sort of a template under, whether it's early childhood or financial security of fathers and families or parents and community voice. And they're being brought together thanks to Erica DeValve and others to create not an exhaustive document, but rather a really succinct summary. Of equal, if not greater importance to the value of that exercise is ensuring that the voices most important to determining what is family success within the communities around our state are the voices of that community itself. And we had initially anticipated, we initially anticipated sort of getting the papers all wrapped up and in a form that we could share with everyone in a summary fashion before bringing it out and sharing it and soliciting input from the community. And thanks to Kathy Rowe, Erica DeValve from the Family Success Institute, and Retha Onatiri, we have been able to launch our first 2 community action forums, sort of the test drive of this format for soliciting input in a manner that is both real and in an environment that is trusted by those who are participating. Early on, we talked about having large group gatherings in different corners of the state to solicit ideas. And the immediate feedback from those of you on this Zoom and others was, if you go to a large forum, you're not going to create a trusted environment in which people really speak their minds. Parents Inc. has held a annual conference for years, and it brings people from across the state together And it enables, because of the trust relationship that those parents have with Parents Inc., it enables a trusting environment. And thanks to those I just mentioned, we were able to use that forum at the beginning of June, I think it was June 1st or 2nd, as a place to test drive our community action forums. And Erica and Retha together assembled a sort of a format for soliciting input, and Kathy enabled them to assemble the space and manage and a way for bringing together groups. And to me, it's one of the most exciting developments of our work groups and effort to bring community voice to the table. And I'll leave it to Retha and Kathy to give you a better description of what happened and what we've learned from it.
Thanks.
Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
Kathy, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Kathy, we're not hearing you.
But we're hearing you.
Can you hear me
Retha.
now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
great. Sorry about that. I think the most important thing was that we didn't give it a ton of thought before we did this. We kind of just jumped in. We knew that we wanted to do a community action forum. I knew I was having my annual conference, and we were all thrilled that it was going to be in person. We did it at the DCF Training Center. We had parents come from all over the state. And what we decided to do, which if any of you are thinking about hosting one of these forums, is, we just attached it to our conference. Thank God for Retha and Erica, because they just jumped into action when I said, hey, could you do a workshop on family success? And then we talked about afterwards, maybe we would do some interviews and develop some questions to talk to parents who are the experts, really, truly the experts in the community about what they want and need and what services work and which ones don't. Ron Chastain and I were talking last night about how it's just incredible to us that people don't recognize parents living in communities as experts. They are the ones that really need to drive everything that we do, talking about what we need to do to make these changes, because as Tom said, government's not going to do it. So I'd like to throw it over to Retha, and she can talk about her experience doing the workshop. And then we have a video that we'd like to share with you that we did at the event.
So thank you, Kathy. And let me first say that I wanted to congratulate you on a very successful conference. It was a Friday morning, dreary, rainy, and the people who came to the conference were like joyful, very happy. It was one of the best group of people I've been in the midst of in a long time. I conducted 2 workshops, and the participants were across the state. So we had representatives from the north, the middle, and the south part of the state. And we asked a series of questions, but I just wanted to share 3 areas that kind of bubbled up across the 3 groups. And let me also mention that there were parents, but there were grandparents there as well. There's a grandparent support group. So that was pretty exciting to hear what grandparents who are supporting their either their children or their grandchildren on a regular basis. So 3 things bubble up to the top. First of all, folks talked about the lack of affordable housing in New Jersey. Folks felt that it's very difficult, very challenging to pay for housing as well as childcare and all the other things that they're responsible for. And for those who end up being homeless, we found and talked about the fact that the shelters are very dangerous. And one person shared in the workshop that when we, many of you have been involved in backpack programs for back to school. And she was wondering why those backpacks were so important. And what she shared was that folks who are homeless need backpacks to keep their items in, because if they go to a shelter, they sleep with the backpacks on their back. So that was pretty, eye-opening. Another thing that was brought up was the lack of transportation, reliable transportation, particularly in places like Monmouth County, where folks are relying on transportation to get to services. And if there's services that are only offered once a month, and if the transportation is not regular or not running, they'll miss their appointment to the services. So transportation was another hot topic. The third topic was a lack of knowledge of services, particularly in two areas. One, services that are offered to schools. What we heard in the workshop was that there are a lot of services in schools that parents are not aware of, and those services are dispersed across a particular municipality or county, and some schools are reluctant to tell parents about services because a parent can move their child to another school to get those services, and the funding for that particular child will move with the child, and the schools will be without that funding. So services like, opportunity to participate in vocational schools. A lot of parents don't know how to participate or how to put their kids in vocational schools. And then the last thing I would mention is that the folks in the workshops believe that there are a lot of services in the positive youth development age group, but there's a lack of services in the strong transition to adulthood. The folks who are around 27, 30-year-olds, they said that they experienced trauma during the positive youth development stage that they have to deal with in that transition, and there's not a lot of mental health and wellness kinds of services that they are aware of. And also, there's a pressure to be successful by 30 years old. So if you're not making a lot of money and you're not successful by 30, a lot of that age group think that they're failures. So there's a need to kind of talk about that and get that sort of thing on the table and try to move away from that.
I'll do it at 9. Oh yeah, it's 9.
So
Yeah,
I
thank you.
think that's the highlight of the discussion. It was very enlightening. The folks were very engaged. Kathy, you have a wonderful group, so thank you for allowing me to have a really great discussion with them.
Oh, thanks, Retha. You know now, though, that you're part of the PA family and you're never going to get out, right?
I don't mind. It was a wonderful group.
It's a life contract. Well, I'm really happy that, that we did this. Retha and I and Erica would be more than happy to share with anyone who wants to step up next to do another community forum. We'd be happy to talk to you and share, how we did it. And I'm really happy now to be able to show you a video, but I will, like I said, it was a learning experience. And one of the things we realized is that our folks were so happy to be out. They make a lot of noise, and we did the interviews in the big room. So this video, I'll apologize ahead of time. You have to listen a little intently, but I think it's worth it. So let me just share my screen. Okie dokie. And okay, all good. And go.
Active, get involved, take action, take accountability of whatever is going on in their community, whatever resources that they need, if it's to childcare, to transportation, get out and be a voice so their voice can be heard, and they can work together, come together as a team. It takes a village to take care of one child, and be that village for that one child. We want to touch these children, and they are our future.
In the environment that we're in urban areas, there's a lot of gang violence, a lot of drug dealing. So a mentor coming from outside of that community, if the kids are able to see, like, hey, they've done it, they were from the same area, but they've actually made it and became something more than just the typical drug dealer or gang member, it'll make a difference for them.
I come across that's really a challenge is providing services for men who are in reentry, men coming out of the criminal justice system, and as well as people with mental health disabilities.
I think just lack of knowledge. People don't know that they can get help from outside sources, or either they're afraid to ask for help. Because actually, I find in the community that I work in, it's a large Latino community. They don't know that they can seek help, that there's help out there. I would like to see, I guess, more advocacy. I would like to see just more outreach. There are resources.
Well, what families need is access to the services that exist and more services in the safety net.
As an outreach specialist, the challenges that I see that are faced by our counties are homes. Shelters are scarce, and then they only have a certain length of time in the shelter. And they have to move on, and they still have no place to go.
Support. And it's not that the support is not out there, but getting access to the support in terms of finance and transportation. Transportation is one of the basic things that people need, because some of them are not.
Generations Family Success Center, Patricia speaking.
Are not important.
Hello?
Families need support. That's
Yes.
basically what families need. They need support. And sometimes we think that we can't have that.
Okay.
But there's support.
Okay, I said.
Even with my son, I have an almost 4-year-old. A lot of activities aren't.
You're coming for diapers?
You have to be like.
Okay, what size did you need?
To even put them in certain programs.
Okay, no problem. You can come down and get them.
Early childhood, earlier stages.
We're at 45 High Street in Mount Holly.
People work together more.
It's the main street right across from where the time clock is.
They can help.
I think it really begins first.
Okay, very good. I'll have the diapers ready for you.
And then in the school.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
There's certain things that there are services, but people are not aware that they could, get those services.
I would love to see more coming together, just bringing awareness. One of the workshops we just attended was the mindfulness, and towards the end of the presentation, she spoke about suicide, and that's very important, especially me working with the teens. And them, just having all the emotions of dealing in this world. So it would be really nice if the community could kind of rally around supporting our future, which is our teens, and just having more awareness events, so more conferences, more information, things like this, to bring people together so that the whole world can kind of be productive.
I think so often now everybody is into electronics and nobody really gets out more. Even when it comes to families eating together, people having time, really having time to even discuss with their children, even if it's something as far as their day, how their day went. So I just feel like togetherness is kind of missing, and that should come back.
Again, I apologize for the sound.
No need for apology.
Kathy, amazing stuff. And, one of the things we had talked about was, whether people would be comfortable stepping forward and talking about what their needs are. And you had talked about, once you started talking about the idea of family success, which is what do people need to have the best chance at a good life, it just opened the floodgates in terms of people being comfortable and talking about that. So Retha and Kathy, that's just amazing stuff. And imagine if we have 20 of these types of forums, and we are going to make sure that they're videotaped, and people are going to participate, and they're going to be done by everybody in this group and all of your friends. It is extremely, extremely powerful. And there isn't one suggestion that's been made by the parents. It doesn't make sense, then we can't make sure happen with them. I mean, everything
know,
they
Retha,
said is common sense.
Retha and I were talking before the event, and we were like, well, do you think some parents will want to be interviewed? Do you think we won't have anybody? She will tell you, we had a line of 25 people waiting to talk about what they thought family success was. And one woman who didn't get interviewed, she grabbed me before she left and she said, I just want to tell you, what we need is supermarkets, not central intake. And I think I'll remember that one the most.
Well, this is really it's fabulous, and what we're hoping over the next couple meetings, because there have been a couple of communities that have been led by public-private partnerships that are like directly taking on a lot of these issues, and I think we're hopeful we're going to be able to hear more from those places. And there are just a couple things before we get into the legislative piece of this that I wanted to mention.
Diana Cooper's got her hand up.
Where is Deanna? Oh, hey, Deanna.
Hi, just briefly, I wanted to share with Kathy that we did do 2 of the forums in Camden County, and it was all around, we asked what the families think family success is. We did one in Camden City, and then we did one in the southern part of the county, and the notes are being typed up now. So I will be more than happy to share those with you, because some of the same things that Retha talked about were some of the same things that we are experiencing in Camden County as well. So thank you so much, Kathy.
Deanna, thank you. We didn't even know we are further ahead with our community action forums than we realized. And I just
they asked us to come back in the southern part of the county as well. So we're thinking about doing some more. We did not videotape them though.
Well, we will get good microphones and we'll get out there to support you. And,
Thank you.
And Dr. Beverly Lynn just yesterday said she would do the same thing with her wonderful folks in Newark. And I think what's so interesting about this is we're going to get the information that I think that parents are going to give to us in a very straightforward way. But the other thing is that we're doing is I think by building the opportunity for people to have a voice, that's going to create the change that's going to help all this come about. And there are just a couple of other things, and then I'll see if anybody else has any thoughts on this part of it. But two experiences I had this week. One was the passage of a very close friend named Bela Kaminsky, who probably most of you never even heard of. He was a government official who did more than anybody I've ever met to push money that everybody said couldn't be pushed out of government into the community. He was, I mean, millions and millions of dollars that probably fund a lot of the, organizations that you're working with today are out there as the result of his work. Charlie remembers the work he did in moving money that people say can't be moved from bureaucracy into community. Kathy Rowe, you're nodding your head, but I wanted to note his passage because he was a magnificent human being and contributor. And the other person who was along with Gene Warnock, when I got to DYFS way back when, again, when most of you were born, I think the story of Gene coming to me wearing a t-shirt with "It's the family, stupid," is we've talked about a lot. But there was another person who came in and said, all you have to do is sit down and talk to parents and you'll figure out what your job is. And that woman was at that point the head of the New Jersey Foster Parents Association. And I had lunch with her this week. She's 88 years old. She's now a national advocate. And all she talks about is all you have to do is sit down with the parents and they'll tell you what you have to do. So at our next learning community, Sue Don Diego has agreed to come in and lecture us. I think you'll find it quite an experience. And then the final thing I want to say about all of this is there are people in government and there are people in nonprofits and there are people in the community and there are volunteers to me. I'm looking at you, and there are people from all walks of life who have allegiances that go beyond their business, they go beyond their organizational activities. And that again is what's going to make the change, is that if we are able to come together and transcend, our organizational interests and our personal interests and all that, that's what's going to make the change. And Kathy and Retha and Deanna, without even knowing it, what you're doing is like serious community change. So I want to really just express our gratitude. So anybody else, before we get into the legislative work, anybody else have any thoughts? I know the Monmouth County folks have to leave, but we are gonna get you in here in front of us to talk about the work you're doing, because so much of this you were, you know, you're a laboratory for change. So anybody
Yeah.
have any thoughts?
I would just like to expand the invitation that is implicit in what we've just seen to everyone here and to our other colleagues in the learning community. These forums will succeed because of the trust relationship between the community and the place that it is held and the sponsors, so to speak, of those meetings. So to the extent any of you have interest or appetite for hosting a forum, please send a note to Lori Henry, and we will begin to coordinate hosting as many of these as possible. We anticipate having real funding for this. We're particularly grateful to Parents Inc. because they picked up the ball and ran with it before we had all our funding in place. But the assumption is that we would have resources to support the participants in this with some form of stipend, and that we will have the resources, obviously, to record and capture the discussions as well. But the starting point, without a trusted environment, trusted community, we will not get the responses and the input that is so desperately needed to direct the transformation we're all talking about. Oh, and I put a note in the chat saying, please send any thoughts you have to Lori, and we will begin to follow up shortly. We're hoping to host these over the summer and going into the fall.
Anybody have any further thoughts or comments or suggestions, or as we?
Yeah, Tom, it might be helpful to get the questions that Retha used, Retha and Kathy, so that we're consistent in what we're asking and we get similar data back, and we can look at all of those areas alongside each other. We're asking the same questions.
We absolutely agree with that, Bev. We're in a sense, Deanna and Retha and Kathy sort of jumped us because we were putting together like in packages about what this is all about and the questions and everything, but you're absolutely right. And Tim, you may want to mention the culmination of this work.
Well, the objective is that all of this, and I said it at the outset, we have good policy framework, really good discussions that are meaningful and relevant in distilling family success to written words, to defined terms, but none of it is as valuable or as important in creating transformation as having the sort of true north direction that community voice lends to this. And the purpose of gathering it is not simply so that we know what it is, but rather to share that with for all of the relevant economic, social, and community resources that our state and inhabit our state, starting with the government at the state level, at the local level, business, and its role in both developing, creating job opportunity, creating economic security, community organizations, and philanthropy, which has been an important partner in supporting the baby steps we've taken so far. So the expectation is that we are going to host a statewide forum as these forums have been consummated or completed, and bring both the video but also the individuals who participate in this to the table, so that the voices of authority, those with resources to dispense, those with opportunities to create, and those with the power to actually make change, are hearing and given the opportunity to undertake new direction that is so critically needed. That we hope will happen at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. And we haven't finalized it, but we're very optimistic that it will be both in a place and in a manner that will attract attention, not only from all levels within the state, but also from outside the state as well.
Great. So what a perfect segue, Timothy. So any thoughts, before we jump into the legislative aspect of our agenda, any additional thoughts from anybody, or? Alrighty. So as we have said from the beginning, and when Jean and I decided that we had to try to set up some kind of organization that could support the local work that was happening all over the place. The idea was that unless we can find ways that state policy and funding can support the idea of family success, both in terms of the big picture, but also more importantly, the very concrete aspects of it, then we have all this fantastic local stuff starting, and it really can sustain itself. So along with the work that we've just heard about, which I think is the most important work, we have gotten to the point with our legislative agenda that some really cool things are happening. And Tim, who has been a tireless worker on this, is going to talk about where he is with the work, because and I want to thank you, Timothy, for what you've done, because it's amazing. And stop laughing. But as we get into this, it's going to be another example where this legislation is not going to happen without people who live in communities and talk to their legislators are talking to their legislators. The whole theme of this meeting is that we're moving from, being conveners and talking way too much to finding ways to support people in local communities to take all this work on together. So Timothy, I'll turn to you.
All right, with apologies in advance that the Tim and Tom chatterbox is getting a little bit long in the tooth here, but we welcome both your participation and more importantly, your action as we move this process forward. And a lot has changed since we met last 2 months ago. Just in summary, we have a Bill of Rights, both in the Senate and Assembly, for Bill of Rights for infants, children, youth, and families, that has 3 major sponsors in the Senate and more coming, and 6 sponsors in the Assembly, and the attention of really important committee chairs as well. It is going to be the framework or the foundation of a transformation that cannot happen without government changing not only how it views policy, but how it spends money and organizes program. And the companion bill, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the Community Recovery and Family Success Act, is the administrative and financial vehicle for bringing community voice to the table and for ensuring that communities are directing the resources themselves and not relying exclusively on the state to run, quote, run programs. These are extraordinary changes that, as you can tell from my gray hair, 40 plus years ago when I was Commissioner of Human Services, how little has changed in this regard. And the circumstances we find ourselves in today add urgency to making the changes that these 2 bills represent. And we've made really significant progress on the latter bill. One, the Bill of Rights all set, but the Community Recovery and Family Success Act was first introduced in the prior legislative session as the COVID-19 pandemic was setting in. Budget looked bad. The state was in crisis in both health and economic sense. And so we proposed a bill with literally $1.8 million of funding to begin some planning effort with the expectation that in a subsequent time we would be able to fund programs that actually implement family success. Well, thanks to Charlie Venti and others on this Zoom and part of the learning community and family success, with the onset of additional funding from the federal government and other resources, including better than expected state revenues, we have developed and now presented through our sponsors to both the administration and to the legislature a needs-based formula for distributing enough money over a 3-year period to really launch community-based and directed family success networks that focus on enabling families across the board to achieve resources needed. The result of that is we now have a new bill introduced in the Senate as of earlier this week, Monday or Tuesday, S2887, and it includes $772 million of appropriation over a 3-year period. I'll come back to the 3-year period, but just to celebrate that, I'm going to ask Lori to share her screen and just give you a quick snapshot of what that bill looks like, because it has been introduced in the Senate and we expect it to be mirrored in the Assembly very shortly. So there you have it. And if you scroll down, you'll see it establishes a council for community recovery and family success. And just go back to the cover page, Lori, and that $772 million figure, which Senator Gill, the prime sponsor, and our staff said, we want to put in all 3 years of appropriations so people know that this is not an insignificant amount of money, but it is the amount of money that's needed. And we can go back to the gallery view now. But there is a context in which that seemingly large amount of money should be made. And that is, in 2019, the Family Success Institute did an analysis of the state fiscal year budget of FY 2018 and identified about $7 billion of funding that goes into the various programs that constitute what would be support for community and families. And that $7 billion is of about $9 billion, $7 billion plus is spent on distress services. So during this 3-year period, using the same basic formulation of state spending, the state will spend around $20+ billion on distress or distress-related services. So the idea that we are asking for what seems to be a significant amount of money is really a drop in the bucket compared to what we're spending overall. In addition, that $7+ billion a year spent on distress is largely controlled and spent through state resources. That $772 billion is intended to be directed to communities with communities, local governments, local nonprofits, agencies, parents, community leaders, those who need and have use of these resources, directing how they are organized and established. And as you've heard, and many of you have participated in, we are building those networks already. Monmouth County, a great example, Passaic County, another county well underway, Middlesex County through the Small Hands and Big Futures, Little Hands and Big Futures program. All of these are creating templates for family success at different stages of development. This is the bill that will create a state level council for determining how to spread that policy and transformative implementation across the state. Having said all that, it will not happen without the support that this learning community, the people you know, and the people in your community expressing support for it and expressing support so that there is recognition that as large as this change is, it is one that is overdue and needed now more than ever. The pandemic has given us both the curse of dislocation, but also the bright light of shining and exposing the type of institutional bias, racism, economic deprivation that we have the resources to address. We only need to summon the will. And that is the challenge that we're facing today. So we want to bring community voice to the table. That is what will bring enactment of this legislation. And we are seeing it in small ways in the communities, but also in small ways in the legislature. But it is going to be an ongoing and ardent effort on our part to enable you on this and others in the learning community and beyond to express support and to make sure that the importance of this is known to those in the legislature. We have, fortunately, through our resources to date, engaged with Pam Boyd, Boyd Thomas, communications consultants to the Family Success Institute. And with their help, we're going to prepare materials that give you tools and the ability to summarize both what's in these bills and how important their enactment is and what it means to the communities in which you live and work. And in summary, that what does it mean? It means that in every county in the state, we're going to look for between 30 million and $90 million over 3 years coming in to support those services, depending on the population of the county, the child population of the county in particular, and the poverty level within that county. And yes, the legislature has to approve this and they have to find the funds for it. But that again is not out of reach. Funding is available through the American Rescue Plan federal funds, for which the state is receiving $6 billion over this year and the next 2 years. The opioid settlement with Johnson & Johnson provides $640 million to be used for purposes like this. There is a growing amount of revenue from the cannabis enacted legislation, which will produce a tax revenue, again, which is to be directed towards communities that have been adversely affected by biased law enforcement. And finally, there's the state surplus this year of $3 to $4 billion beyond what was expected. All of these resources are available at this time when the need is so evident and great. It is a rare opportunity, and this is our moment to help compel both the legislature and the executive branch to embrace a change that is long overdue, but will actually set the stage for a different form of service and support to families than anywhere else in this country. And without trying to exaggerate the role that you are going to play, it is one that will succeed with your support and will not succeed without it. I think it's my interest is to stop talking, and because she has been so involved in both this project, but also in moving communities to take action in other ways, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Kathy for a little further discussion of this. Kathy.
Hold on, Tim. Can you hear me? Tim, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, great, great. So how about if we open this up for discussion? I know we have a very active group here, and if you just raise your hands, and now's the time to hear from the community. I'm going to turn on the gallery view so I can see folks' hands. Now, I know this crew has something to say.
I have a question.
Yes,
to
Retha.
Tim. So Tim, can you tell us how it's moving through? I think you said it was heard in a committee on the assembly side. And in terms of the budget, I'm assuming it's not going to end up in the governor's budget this year, but you're looking for it in the next session?
Those are two good questions. The first is, it has not been introduced. This bill with the funding has to be reintroduced in the assembly. The good news on that front is that the chair of the committee that will hear the bill is a co-prime sponsor, and that's Shavonda Sumter. So that we are confident this literally, while we've been in discussion with the assembly members over the increase in funding, we're confident that it will get reintroduced. And Senator Gill, who literally just incorporated the changes that included the funding in the bill and had OLS document those, is reaching out to Vin Gopal, her colleague in Vermont County, to secure his sponsorship. And together they will bring it to the attention of Senator Vitale, who will chair the committee in which it will be received and viewed in the Senate. In terms of funding, it is not straight appropriation alone that is the only resource. while the state resources are appropriated. The availability of some portion of the federal American Rescue Plan funding is entirely discretionary and outside the appropriation process. So it is a matter of, through both the legislature, but more importantly, the executive branch and the governor's office in particular, accepting that some piece of that funding be used in 2023 to launch this process. And to finish the thought, the formula that was developed over that 3-year period is not equal in each year. It reflects the fact that we will begin the process in fiscal year 2023, only a few days away. So only $70 million of that 771 is included in the FY 2023 need. It grows to 240 million as you begin to expand out and include more counties. And then in the final year, it's projected to be 280 in fiscal year 24 and 420 in fiscal year 25. So there's both time to develop and generate both specificity and support from the different communities that are receiving the funding. But in addition, it is also a period where we have 3 years of federal funding. We have growing revenues that have not yet been essentially allocated, thinking of the opioid settlement and the cannabis revenue. Obviously, there will be competition for it, but this is a modest amount of what the total is if we are able to engage effectively with the sector.
Tim, George has a question.
Hey, Tim. So there, this is awesome stuff. Pretty cool. Two questions. And you might have addressed it, and I missed it, just in terms of the mechanics of. So does this new bill supersede the preceding legislation? Does it sort of?
Yes, it does. Yeah, and I didn't know that until yesterday. I mean, I literally learned from the senator that they were that it had to be reintroduced, and that's why it is S2887, and it will be a new assembly bill as well.
Okay. Does it? The second question: does it indicate the administrative side of this in terms of what state agency is the? Has it reached that point as of yet?
Yes, the bill actually recognizes that the Family Success Council, which includes 7 cabinet officers, and then it's a total of about 25 people, representatives from community, actually a number from organizations that are part of this learning community, and that body will have an independent authority to both receive funding and to distribute funding based on its own policies and development. It is housed within, but is not part of, the Department of Children and Families, but Community Affairs, Labor, and Workforce Development, Transportation, Health, Human Services, all those individuals are part of the Family Success Council, and it will be chaired or co-chaired by a representative of the state administration, meaning one of those cabinet officers, and someone who is specifically from the community, so that we're ensuring an equality of both authority and voice.
Is there, so given that, is there language that would allow, in terms of the distribution of these dollars, is there language that would allow non-government entities, i.e. United Ways, childcare resource and referral agencies, the ability to be deployers of this funding? Is there language built into?
Yeah, I'd like to turn this over to Tom for a second, because he and Charlie were really the architects of how the legislation was intended to reach into and secure that part of the community voice. Tom, you're on mute.
Charlie has his hand up.
Yeah, Charlie, why don't you pick this up?
All right, I was going to mention something else too, but so the legislation, in addition to the state council that Tim just referred to, requires the establishment of 21 community councils, one in each county. For there to be service plans to be developed based on needs assessment, local priorities, that again would be informed by community participants. The idea in all of this is that beyond this 3-year period, where there are these additional resources or revenue possibilities that are available, that the continuation, the sustainable funding for this, assuming that there's no new great opportunities, no new taxes, no new rescue plans, et cetera, that the way that programs will be sustained and expanded will be based on performance in those communities. So for instance, if in Cumberland County or in Warren County or whatever, there's a priority, or one of their priorities has to do with fatherhood and child support collections. And we're gonna wanna show an increase in child support. And for those increased child support payments to be reinvestment. Another county may be looking at reducing the number of adolescents going into emergency rooms for behavioral health support. And so calculating the savings by having crisis workers or other supports in the community that were invested in the first 3 years, would be the mechanism to sustain those activities. Also, and not to get in the weeds too much, but we're hoping that this whole process will be a catalyst towards New Jersey doing a better job about drawing down federal funds. We're last in the country in terms of the dollars that we send to Washington and what comes back. We're last, right? Number 50. And so there are opportunities to participate with federal funding that I think that we've been very lax about. I know we have been in our state because our economy's been fine, or there just hasn't been the motivation to do it. So I think there's going to be a combination of things. Some of it will continue to be developed over the next 3 years. But we really see this initial phase as providing the catalyst or the foundation for this transformational change that will become like just part of the way New Jersey does business going forward, and ultimately shifting investments from distress to success. And in 2018, 1% shift equaled a little over $100 million a year. And today it's $150 million a year, just shifting 1% of our distress related investment. So these local community councils will be the mechanism, and they'll be somewhat similar to the state council, that there'll be public-private partnerships, and that's how places like United Way, et cetera, other nonprofits will be involved based on those priorities set up in those communities, how to do business.
Thanks, Charlie.
Can I just add a couple of things to this? Direct answer to George's question, which is crucial, that if we are successful with this legislation and this funding, and this money goes to the same old people to do the same old thing with different language, then we failed. And so the basic idea of this, in the same way I'm looking at Tamia again, that every single person is a unique person, every family is a unique family, every community is a unique community. So in one community, it might be that the United Way is the head of it. It might be that a county government's the head of it in another place. It could be that LISC is the lead in another place. It could be that a parent-led organization is the catalyst in another place. And if this legislation, we get it through, and all, because it's a huge effort, it's got to be flexible based upon local conditions and both local interests, or it's a farce. The second thing I'll say is that, how does this fit into other things that are going on? Like Retha Onatiri one of our, dear leaders was the leader of restorative justice in New Jersey. This is complementary to we are not in competition with anything that's going on with restorative justice. It's part of family success. Reith and I talked about this right from the beginning. In terms of early childhood success, Senator Ruiz has a whole package of bills that are in to support the child care community. We are totally complementary to this. We are supporting her package of bills. There is no competition there, in that area. We have leaders in this group, and I just to mention a couple, George Cruz and Gloria Avtansky just last week announced the establishment of a financial opportunity center to bring financial security to residents in Perth Amboy without anybody from the state helping us. There's a lot of local initiative can take place. And Gloria and George, thank you so much for your leadership. They figured out the plan, they figured out the funding. They are leaders in our group. Charlie Venti, Mr. Humble Charlie Venti, just assumed the chairpersonship of the Advocates for Children of New Jersey, ACNJ, has been traditionally the most vocal advocacy group in the state. And Charlie Venti, who has been a founding member of our board, is now the chair of that organization. The Assemblywoman, who was the sponsor of our legislation, just assumed the leadership of one of the biggest child-serving organizations in the state. Siobhan DeSumter is now she's your boss, Joe, I think now. She's amazing. There are so many opportunities for us. Chris Kirk, first of all, welcome, but I also saw your comment about the needs assessment that you're completing and how the needs are common across the state. So if this legislation ends up being like every other fragmented, top-down, the same old people legislation that's not controlled by the people who are the supposed beneficiaries of this, I say we roll up our tent and go home right now. But if we can make this work, not only in what's in the legislation, but what we can bring to the legislation, we can really make a difference. And that's what I'm hoping we do together.
Mark Valley from Norwest Cap has a question or comment. Mark?
Well, two things. One is I wanted to second what Charlie said, which is, and I know it's boring and a little bureaucratic, but my experience in running New Jersey After 3 was what saved New Jersey After 3 through a couple of really tough budget cycles was being able to show some results for what the money for New Jersey After 3 was purchasing. And so I would just urge us to make sure that which this legislation is amazing, and if we get it passed, that we have to have some things that we can report back year after year to make sure that folks know that their investment is making real impacts in the community. And I agree that it will vary from community to community. The other thing I wanted to add was what Chris mentioned is, the Community Action Network, imperfect as it may be, it is required to perform community needs assessments. So in some communities, it may be really helpful to have sort of either use a Community Action Network's data or share data collection processes so that we're collecting the same data, because as Chris pointed out in the chat, we got the same top 3 priorities that you heard from the earlier presentation this morning. So it's not rocket science. The parents know what they need, and when you ask them, they're going to tell you. So I would just say those two things. Charlie, you're absolutely right. We got to have some measurements and some things to be able to report out, and let's share resources like community needs assessments.
Mark, just a couple thoughts on that. First of all, on one hand, I don't think there's any question that we have to be able to show results of progress, which I think we already have it all over the place, which we can pull together, and we have to be able to show performance. On the other hand, if you look at that distress budget in terms of what prisons do and juvenile corrections facilities do, and all these different systems that are funded to the billions every year, they don't have any outcomes the only outcomes we know is that they make things worse. So I want to balance our requirements for accountability with lack of accountability for the rest of the system. The second thing I want to say is you are 1,000% right about using data and people who are already doing this work. I think what we're finding in a lot of communities is that parents are sick of needs assessments. They've been needs assessed to death. They want some action. So anybody that's got some good information out there, let's pull it together. let's use it. Let's start bugging people about what their needs are, and let's start responding to the needs that they've voiced so beautifully through Kathy Rowe and Retha's workshop. So we are totally aligned with everything you're saying.
Anybody else? Tamia?
Thank you. I wanted to say, Tim, what you said about having equity, what would you say? You said the equity of authority and voice. I thought that was really poignant. And so I just want to thank you for giving me that verbiage, because it really helps express kind of what I feel about what's necessary for things to move forward. I just had a specific question, and I'm not sure if maybe I misunderstood, but if I understood you correctly, you said for the 2023 fiscal budget that certain counties have been identified to receive the funding. And then if there's success there, then it will be expanded out to more counties. Did I understand that correctly? And if I did, which counties have been identified to receive the funding from the bill?
The counties have not been identified. So the sort of pro forma plan called for an estimate as to who would be ready and where, or the sort of a combination. And this is a decision that the council, once formed, would make. So imagine, here we are at the beginning of the fiscal year already. You need to get the bill enacted. We need to have the council appointed. At that point, you've got 20 or nearly 20 community and regional representatives, meaning people from the community at the table with cabinet officers. They determine amongst themselves, looking at some data, don't have to go out and search for it, poverty levels of children, number of children, overall population, and the readiness of organizations that may already have started to form to spend the money effectively. So we're not going to sort of put it out because so-and-so was the chair of a committee and therefore their county is going to get more money than anybody else, but rather we have a plan, we're ready to implement, we need this much for this year. That's how the first 70 million would be spent. And as you can tell by my description, at this juncture, it's not a precise process, but more important, in my view, the legislation should make it clear that decision should emerge from a council in which community voice is very much at the table, helping make those decisions in the best way possible. And if more counties are farther along than that $70 million estimate suggests, I would argue you would distribute the money that was available, perhaps a little bit less for each, in order to accelerate the processes as effectively as possible and on as broad a basis as possible.
Tim, I have a question and a comment. Will you be able to share that legislation in the chat, or can people reach out for you to send it out to them?
Yeah, we'll put it, Lori, would you put can you put the bill in the chat or a way to receive it? And if not, we will certainly distribute it. It will go out. We usually send a letter or note to all the learning community members following a meeting. So those on this and those who are not able to attend will get that letter, and we'll certainly attach the legislation to that. So it'll be out within a few days.
And the other thing is, thank all of you for your efforts on that. And, the question is what can we do as learning community members to support this and to rally the troops? Because, this is probably the most important thing that we'll ever do, most of us.
If we're successful in getting the legislation enacted, we will have everyone in this group and beyond will have done an enormous amount to either reinforce the vision and support that they secured from that the legislators need and the executive branch. But in addition, reach out and elicit support from those who may not know about this, but understand that there's a need here that we have ignored for far too long, and a whole host of needs. And I think there's a stumbling block I always confront in thinking about legislation, which is these bills and this idea of a Bill of Rights is far more profound than $770 million over 3 years in a $40+ billion budget. And to draw attention at the executive level, at the legislative level, and at the local level, that the change this imparts and implies is far more profound than money, and that more money will be needed over time and where available to achieve the goals that it aspires to. Every conversation on this and every meeting points to the dearth of affordable housing in New Jersey, but elsewhere as well. That is not a problem that a state or city or county will solve alone from a financial standpoint. We need to bring the federal government back into the affordable housing business at a level and in a way that we haven't seen in decades. That is not captured in this bill. It is implicit in the Bill of Rights, and it is spoken about in every conversation that all of us have. But because it's capital intensive, takes a lot of money, it's something that we struggle to find the way to get there. But if we start with this and move this bill through, we will have a platform and a means of repeating what everyone here has said. Without secure housing, families can't succeed. End of statement. And we need to get to that point. And each of us has a role to play here in reaching out to someone. If you don't know a legislator, call a neighbor, call someone who may, call a council person, and let them know how important these steps are along a path we have waited far too long to walk down.
Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you if there aren't any more questions or comments.
Any other thoughts that folks have? Well, we're looks like we'll have our meeting done before our allotted time, and it's amazing how much concentration you can get into a short period of time when people are alerted on the same page together. So thank you all for everything that you not only what you've done, but hopefully what we're about to do together. Pam Boyd is going to be putting together some information and some methods about getting out information about the legislation. But so I have sort of two closing thoughts about this. One is, first of all, Commissioner Beyer was not able to be here today because of a schedule conflict, but she will be at our next meeting, and she's been, a real trooper in terms of joining us with these meetings, and she sends her regards. But the other thing that she has begun with Tim and myself is to open up a dialogue about how her work and the work of the Family Success Institute can begin to align more closely, both at the state level and the local level. And hopefully that could be a real breakthrough in terms of, collective impact, because it's going to take everybody working together. The other thing that she has been very clear about recognizing is that a lot of the issues that related to family success are not within the jurisdiction of her department, but are in other departments across state government. And so she realizes the value of, everybody here and what we're trying to do. But I think the final thing that I want to say is I have yet to find a person who can argue with the concept of family success. How the hell can you argue with the idea of giving people the best chance they can have at a good life? It's not about, like, and when we get into this distress stuff and, should it be this population or this age group or, blah, which problem is the worst and how do we do all this? You end up in what Gloria Eptansky has come to call a service jungle of, related or unrelated efforts to try to respond to crisis. But when you begin to talk with, regular people and parents, and Tommy and I have had some interesting conversations about this, what do people need and want? And I don't mean just need, but want to have the best chance at a good life. That is it's better for our community, it's more cost efficient, and it brings people together. So there hasn't been anybody can argue with it unless they can find how it interferes with their self-interest. And that's what we have to overcome. So somehow miraculously, my friend from Mentor Newark has appeared. And he has traditionally found a way to bring us all together as our last word. Thomas, I hate to put you I haven't seen you for a while. You look fantastic, man.
Thank you.
Can you offer us some closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for being late. A lot of conflicting meetings going on, but I just wanted to stop in. The one thing that we looked at this year with the mentors and the mentees we've been working with in Newark is really having our theme kind of be curious. What you just said, ask questions. And, you know, it really came to me this year working with a lot of our students. You know, a lot of times we kind of prescribe stuff without asking what hurts first. So we kind of walk in, you know, imagine if you went to the doctor, they just said, okay, here, take these red pills. I've done a lot of studies. I understand. Here, take these pills. This is great for you. And you're kind of like, you never asked me what hurt. But trust me, I know a lot. I know a lot. Here's the pills. And it's kind of where we deal with sometimes with youth and with families, that we never really legitimately ask them, you know, what hurts? What, you know, be curious. So I just wanted to share that theme with everybody, that as we go about the work that we do, sometimes we can get so deep into it that we forget to ask people, you know, how are you? What's going on? How can I help? Rather than coming with a prescribed solution because we read some books or we went to some classes. So that's my thing, be curious. And if anybody watches Ted Lasso, one of my favorite shows, there's a really great scene in there about being curious. All you have to do is Google Ted Lasso, the dart game, and you'll see a video that talks about what curiosity does and how empowering curiosity can be for both of us. So I'm living with that one. So thank you, Tom. We can't hear you, Tom.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for appearing magically as you often do. And we're 4 minutes before our allotted time. So if anybody has any final thoughts of any type, state them now or hold your peace until the next meeting. And thank you so much for being here. And Jean, it's good to see you, my co-founder, and what the hell have we done here? Thank you so much. And until next time, be well.
Bye.
Thank you. See you guys.